This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch or get 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture. Hello, all our listeners to
and
a very...
big, I just scream real loudly. Just not scared.
Open with the jump scare. Hello and welcome to a very spooky, freaky episode of film franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast, joining you just in time for All Hallows Eve, Halloween. I was never allowed to celebrate Halloween growing up.
Well, yeah,
still known as an adult either. Yeah. And this is the way we celebrate it here at the Cult Popture podcast. We're usually on the show, Richard and myself, AJ, we will watch and discuss an entire film franchise, as you know. But similar to what we did for Christmas last year, where we contacted 3 of our fans and covered a 2-film Christmas franchise with each of them and released it as one big package episode, we thought we'd do the same thing this year for Halloween. So welcome to the film franchise Fortnight's freaky fan fiasco.
When you said welcome to, I'm sure it didn't pick up on the recording, but your recording just glitched out and the volume tripled, and it was
that happened before.
Genuinely terrifying.
Yeah, that happened from your end before, which is quite, now you know. We've each experienced the same terrifying electronic phenomenon.
God, it's following us!
Oh my god. So, on this episode, you are going to hear 3 mini episodes of Film Franchise Fortnights talking about 2 film franchises. And you're going to hear 3 different fans, all who support us on Patreon, which is sort of a way that we can thank our patrons, one national holiday at a time by not randomly selecting, but selecting people to come and talk with us. So if you are a patron, if we do this again in the future, you could be up for that. And if you're not a patron, but you want to do a podcast with us, then jump on the motherfucking bandwagon.
I can't think of other franchises or other holidays that I can think of. 3, unless we did Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I've thought of Valentine's Day, but you know what stops me from wanting to do Valentine's Day? Is I can't think of a word starting with F that would go before fan fiasco. Except for that one. Except for fucking fan fiasco, but that doesn't get to the heart of what Valentine's Day is. Yeah. So we are going to, if you've got an F word that means romantic, drop it down. We are going to be covering 3 different franchises on this episode, and those franchises are, we're going to be covering the 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later series. So I've decided just now that'll be the first one you hear. And that will be with one of our patrons, Kate Pickworth-Smith, who lives here in Christchurch and is a dear friend of mine. And Richard, what is the second franchise that we're going to be talking about?
It'll be An American Werewolf in London and Paris with a patron whose real name you might not know, but I'm sure you've heard the name Maisol Mise, or Maisol Mise, as it was pronounced for over a year. But her name is Sarah Velling. She was someone who we got to speak to for the first time doing this. That's cool.
Yeah, and that was really fun. And the last franchise you hear us talk about on this episode will be Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You, which we recorded with Brianna McZant. Brianna McZant. Pick one. Pick a pronunciation. Yeah. And so we'll be covering that last on this episode. There will be a musical interlude between each franchise. But
so you know when we're covering a new one.
Yeah, exactly. So, Richard, we'll be back at the end to announce the first post-Halloween film franchise. So stay tuned for that at the end. And on with the show! All right. Okay, so here we are. This is actually going to be our first segment of Freaky Fan Fiasco.
Oh, man, I had all these plans, these callbacks planned.
Yeah. It's the last one we've recorded though. For some reason, we decided to do it that way. What actually happened is that when we did the other two, I think we made references to like implying that wasn't the first one, and so this one has to be the first one, right?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, you don't know what I'm talking about. Hey, we're here with Kate. How are you, Kate?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I already asked that.
Yeah, you did.
I'm as nervous as you are, Kate.
Aww.
Look at me. Richard, say hi to Kate.
Hi.
Hi, Richard.
All right. So, Kate is one of our patrons, and she is here to talk with us about the two 28 days/weeks later films.
And why are we doing these films with Kate?
Because it's... I don't know. Why are we doing these?
Because 28 rhymes with Kate. That was our...
Oh, really?
That was our... We were trying to... We decided on the franchises we wanted to do and the three people. And we're like, okay, how do we decide which one to do with which? And I was like, well, 28 rhymes with Kate. And we were like, sweet. Lock that one in.
Yeah.
Great. Well, 28 Days Later, it came out in 2002 and it was directed by Danny Boyle. And the film was also written by Alex Garland, who would later go on to direct Annihilation, Ex Machina. He wrote The Beach, the novel that The Beach movie was based off.
And the movie as well, didn't he?
I did too, yeah, that's right. That's a weird part of that fact that I know. I always knew of Alex Garland as the guy who wrote 28 Days Later, so it's funny to see, now he's got his own stuff. And what do you guys think that 28 Days Later has on Rotten Tomatoes? Any guesses?
28.
Okay.
I was going to say like 90.
Yeah, no, actually, can I change mine to 82?
It's 86, so
Nice.
somewhere in between what you both said. And that's the magic of Rotten Tomatoes, I think, is that everyone, whenever you hear the score, you're like, oh yeah. Unless you vehemently disagree with it, and then you're like, what? Kate,
What a sick tangent.
What is 28 Days Later about?
So it starts off with these like environmentalists who break into a lab and release these monkeys. Apart from the monkeys are infected with this virus, and so they start killing each other. And then it cuts to this guy just laying naked in hospital.
Yep.
And then he starts wandering around London and it's completely deserted. And then he gets attacked and finds these people. And yeah, it turns out the world's been devastated by this virus. And they meet more survivors along the way and go and try to find this supposed safe haven where the military is.
Yeah.
But then it turns out that the military is actually filled with evil rapist men who want women to continue the world.
Yeah, that's a good summation. So it's a zombie movie. Danny Boyle, ever the auteur he is, likes to refer to it as a zombie movie where there's no zombies because technically they're infected. They are not dead, which is a prerequisite to be a zombie, as you are the undead. So the zombies in 28 Days Later aren't dead. They aren't dead. So technically not zombies.
That's kind of like Danny Boyle's thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So 28 Days Later is a zombie movie without any zombies. 127 Hours is like an adventure movie where the main character can't move.
Exactly.
And yeah, there's a bunch of examples like that.
How he describes his films.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people seem to think 28 Days Later is the first case of fast zombies in fiction. Apparently, Return of the Living Dead did it first, but that came out in like the 80s, and then no one did it until 28 Days Later. But it is credited with kicking off the zombie trend that we are now still
reinvigorating it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. He didn't kick it off, but it was one of the first, if not the first, mainstream zombie film of the new millennium. So that was followed 5 years later with 28 Weeks Later, directed by Juan Carlos Fresnadillo. What do we think that has on Rotten Tomatoes?
Like 70?
Yeah, I was going to say 72.
71. The difference. Very good, guys. Richard, what's 28 Weeks Later about?
So 28 weeks later, we pick up like some amount of time after the first film. I can't recall how long. And
it's like nearly 30 weeks, I think.
yeah, something like that. And so now there's like safe zones essentially where the virus has all but been wiped out, kind of thing.
Well, because an interesting thing that we haven't mentioned yet is it was contained to England. It was contained to Britain.
Yeah.
Which is the kind of the reveal at the end of 28 Days Later, is that it's only England that's infected.
And so now they most parts of the country the virus is all but wiped out, but then it's discovered that there are like carriers of the virus that essentially they at first they think they might be immune to it, but they realize that they're actually they still have the virus and can pass it on, but it just doesn't affect them. And then it's this whole thing with like, again, there's like a group of survivors, and this time the US Army's involved as well.
Yeah, it's kind of the...
It's a weirdly like star-studded cast as well of people who are just about to be famous.
Yeah, exactly, right? They're all about to be famous. Like, we're talking Idris Elba, Rose Byrne, who else is
Imogen Poots, Jeremy Renner.
Jeremy Renner.
Yeah.
This was my first Jeremy Renner movie that I ever saw.
Yeah.
I remember describing him to my friend who was a real big fan of Queens of the Stone Age, that he looked like Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age mixed with Nathan Fillion. And that was my like cool observation when I was 14. I was like, this is what he looks like. And and she once scolded me because I kept saying that whenever Jeremy Renner would enter conversation. Yeah, and even 28 Days Later kind of has a similar thing. Like, you've got Naomi Harris, Brendan Gleeson was probably already somewhat
Yeah, I think
famous.
Brendan Gleeson and Christopher Eccleston were kind of
Yeah.
already known at the time.
And then there's Cillian Murphy as well, plays Jim in 28 Days Later, who's now a relatively household name. Famous enough to get his own, GQ iconic characters video. So there you go. I think then there's also Hannah from 28 Days Later, who seemingly dropped off the map after the film, and I didn't look into it, but she's not famous. So 28 Weeks Later, it follows the group of survivors, one of which is like the potential, immune child who is that could create a vaccine for the infection. And they're being followed by their now zombified dad, who in the end bites the son, infecting him, but because he's a carrier, he doesn't turn into a zombie. But then they leave England, and the last shot of the film shows that because of that, now the infection is in Paris, potentially the rest of the world. Sweet. All right, so 28 Days Later, I think, might be the first time since we covered Back to the Future back in 2016 that we've talked about one of my favourite films of all time. Like, 28 Days Later, when I first started getting into films, 28 Days Later was like one I recalled seeing when I was younger. I was like, I've got to watch that again. I love this movie so much. And Richard, you'd never seen it before.
That is correct.
And I can't wait for you to be like, yeah, it's all right.
It is.
So yeah, what did you guys think of the film? Kate, what was your favourite, and what do you think of them in general?
I really like them both. For me, I think I actually wound up seeing 28 Weeks Later. First, when I was a teenager, my sister and I, we used to watch horror movies together all the time, so it's quite a nostalgic thing for me. And I ended up having, when I was younger, a reoccurring nightmare, in the film when he, at the beginning, he busts out of the house and sprinting across the field towards the boat, and you see the shot of this, like little hill, and suddenly all these zombies just start flowing over it.
It's so good with communicating how close they are to him.
Yeah.
Like, the spatial distance between them is like, they could catch you, dude. They're so close
exactly,
to you.
Yeah, and that just haunted my dreams for weeks and weeks. But I think on the rewatch, I definitely prefer 28 Days Later. I think the pacing in it's so fascinating the way it like holds that tension and slowly builds that you don't even notice that the music's there until your heart's thumping in your chest along with it. Yeah, so I definitely think I prefer that one.
Nice.
Yeah.
What do you think, Richard?
Yeah, it's interesting going into like one of those movies where you think about what you thought of the movie beforehand and then what you kind of know of it afterwards. Because so obviously the iconic opening, well, it's not the opening of the film, but the one of the early scenes when he's walking around a deserted London, and I'm sure we'll go into how they filmed that because that's like one of those famous pieces of film trivia, and it's so interesting and it's so effective. And then after that finished, and then he meets the new people, I was like, actually, I have no idea what this film is about. Like, it's one of those films where I just assumed that I'm like, oh yeah, I know most of the plot of 28 Days Later. And so, yeah, it was quite interesting. I like the but one thing I really like is the characterization of the infected. Because like we've seen fast zombies in other movies, like say like World War Z. And that's a film where you really get the sense that they're zombies, they're undead. Whereas in 28 Days Later, in this series, I quite like that the rage virus seems to be like, you're still human, but you above everything else want to kill.
Yeah, you even hear at one point Jim, who's Cillian Murphy's character, he kills a zombie like kid, and as the scene cuts, you hear the kid say, "I hate you." Like it's because I would need to research this again. I didn't beforehand, but I remember when I binge watched all the special features for these movies back when I was a teenager. The way that they made the sounds of the infected is they basically got people to swear heaps. They got them to do a bunch of expletives, and then they chopped it up so it's not in order. So you're hearing like if someone screams like "fuck you," you're hearing like you know. So it's like
that's awesome.
a scrambled up version. So I think the "I hate you" from the kid is a piece of unbroken audio that got through that scrambling that they just didn't bother to change, and it kind of adds to it. It kind of makes it
because there is still some humanity in a way, like it's especially like the way some of the ways they kill as well is like, this is, you want to, and you actually are trying to inflict pain on this person. This isn't for your own gain. It's the only thing you're gaining out of this is how much you love killing and inflicting pain on other people. Whereas like traditional zombies are like, they just have one goal, and that's to eat, and then it just happens to be humans. Whereas it's like, I actually want to hurt people. But yeah, so that was one thing that I actually really enjoyed, because growing up, I maybe this is why I avoided watching the film for so long, is that I went through a phase of being like a real zombie purist. Me and my mate would when you could get like 10 for $10 movies, or like 5 for $5 or whatever it was out from the video store, we would we'd just get like 5-10 zombie movies. So I've seen some weird obscure zombie movies. And it's one of those things. It's not even a genre I would say that I particularly like or love or anything like that, but it was just like a fun thing we did for a while. And whenever there was fast zombies, we were like, oh, they're not real zombies, kind of thing, but I like Danny Boyle says, they're not zombies, they're infected.
It's not a zombie movie. What are you fine.
Exactly.
That's what Danny Boyle's response would be to that, right? If you're like, zombies don't run, he's like, okay, fine, they're not zombies.
Yeah. And then the second film, I kind of thought they were mostly on par. There's some weird issues, especially in the third act of Weeks, where it's it gets quite a bit like some of the editing's really choppy, and it just kind of like, I get the effect they're going for, but it is quite hard to watch at times. And not in the way of like, oh, that's so well made. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It's just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, so that's me.
Nice. So obviously, I prefer the first film, but I do really like parts of 28 Weeks Later, and I think it takes I think it takes a sequel as mildly inferior as Weeks to highlight what's so good about Days. Like,
sure, yeah.
When I talk about why I don't like Weeks, I'm constantly referring to Days. Well, no, it's not that I don't like it. I just think it's inferior. For example, I love that Days follows a group of nobodies. They're not important. They're just survivors. They're you and me, you know? Whereas Weeks, like, ups the ante by making it the most important child in the world as a main character, you know? And it's about the story of infection as opposed to the story of these people who are stuck in the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
And I also think Weeks is a very Americanized movie. Not only because there's American characters, but it was co-financed by America. And Days not only feels completely submerged in British characters and culture, but it's also filmed in a way that resembles a home video more.
Yeah,
like a Hollywood blockbuster.
I think that, like, because I believe that the choice of camera it was mainly because of these scenes where they're having to, like, stop traffic for a moment, then run in and get the shot that it's like a camcorder almost that they could just quickly run in and do it rather than having to like film in. But it looks like it looks like Spaced or something like that. One of those kind of early 2000s British sitcoms. And so that kind of, or like the opening scene when he wakes up in the hospital. I was watching it with Jess, who is the backbone of my life, and I said that you'll get that joke later on in the podcast.
Another episode. Kate laughed anyway, so
I did.
It just works.
I thought it was really cute.
It's cuter when it originates. So just hold your breath for that.
But the scene when he wakes up, and I was like, you could tell me this was Life on Mars or something, you know, like one of those shows, those like. That weird era of shows that I like don't really know that much about, but I can kind of like
conflate what I like that it's hard to find like a good quality version of 28 Days Later, you know, like because it looks like it's filmed in 480p for a lot of it. It feels so gritty and real, and I really like that. So as we've talked about a little bit, 28 Days Later will be the first of two films we will discuss on Freaky Fan Fiasco this episode, in which production shut down Piccadilly Circus. Because in American Werewolf in London, they also shut down Piccadilly Circus to film. But the production for 28 Days Later also famously shut down other parts of an otherwise bustling London city, including Westminster Bridge, Horse Guards Parade, and Oxford Street, during the scene towards the beginning of the film where Cillian Murphy's Jim wakes up from his coma 28 days after the infection breaks out and wanders through the deserted streets trying to figure out what is going on. What a scene that is, man.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
One of my my favorite bits of trivia about that I've read before is, so there's a bit where they have to shut down like the motorway, and so they did it like, as far as I know, did it by like slowly stopping traffic until they had enough, and then they had 1 minute gaps to shoot it, kind of thing. But they were like, "Oh fuck, how are we going to do this?" So what they did is they got like attractive young women to, like attractive girls in like their 20s, to be the ones to say, "Hey, we're just filming. Could you just wait here for a minute?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure thing." Because if some guy in a high-vis vest comes along with his pot belly or whatever and a clipboard. You tell them to fuck off. You've got to get to work.
They also upturned a bus for one shot where you see an upturned bus and then reset the bus in 20 minutes to get like a 5-second shot. It's an amazing scene. And I would say it's the best scene in the film, except for the third act of 28 Days Later, when Jim escapes the soldiers, loses his shirt, it starts raining, and he's like, I'm going to go save Selena and Hannah. And he turns into essentially a zombie to go back and get them. Oh my God, I love that scene so much. I love Cillian Murphy is such good casting specifically for that scene because he looks so sinister. Yeah. He looks like an alien. And he's emulating the zombies themselves, and I love after he kills everyone, he like gouges this guy's eyes out, and then Selena like nearly kills him, but then she stops and he's like, "That was more than a heartbeat," because that's a reference to something she said at the start of the film. I love this film so much. And and then they start kissing, and he's covered in blood, and it's gross. It's fucking gross. And there's like undeniably blood getting on Selena, you know, and I love that this horrific sight of someone covered in blood kissing someone else is like, that's the guy you're rooting for. You're rooting for the guy covered in blood who looks like a monster and who has just gouged out someone's eyes. It's such a cool scene. What did you guys think?
Oh, yeah, like when he goes after the soldiers and like, the commander turns around and then the other soldiers just sitting dead in like the Jeep, and you just seen him on the roof in this like a second ago, and you're like, how did he get there?
Yeah.
It's just
it's he becomes the nightmare of the story. He becomes the zombie essentially. It's
I
so
Am Legend.
Cool. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So, famously as well, 28 Days Later has a few alternate endings. Did you know about this, Richard? I know you knew about it.
Yeah.
I did not. It's got a famous, because I mean, it's pretty famous.
Yeah, pretty famous. So there's three big ones that have been. Two of them were filmed and one of them was just storyboarded, and all of them Jim dies. So in the actual ending, they escape. He gets shot by Christopher Eccleston before they kill him, and then it cuts to 28 days later, and Jim wakes up and he's healed from his wounds, and they're making a sign to try and alert a jet flying overhead that they're okay. So Jim dies in all of these alternate endings, presumably from the wounds that Christopher Eccleston gives him, because he like shoots him in the stomach, which is a hard wound to come back from in a post-apocalyptic society. So essentially, that you see it briefly, like a quick montage after he gets shot of them in the hospital. The two alternate endings where he dies in this way is. One is just he dies and then Selena and Hannah like leave the hospital, and the other one is the same thing, but then it does that scene at the end where they make the sign crying for help, but Jim's not there. So it's Selena and Hannah finding happy ending. But the third unfilmed alternate ending is fucking wild. So it departs dramatically after Frank gets infected. So another great scene in this film, the fourth kind of one of the survivors kicks a fence to try and get a crow to leave a corpse, and a drop of blood falls in his eye, and that's how he gets infected. It's so tragic. So after that happens, they don't find the soldiers, but they do keep Frank alive, and then they meet a scientist, and it ends with Jim deciding to do a blood transfusion with the help of the scientist and give all his blood to Frank because they have the same blood type, so that Frank's infected blood will be rid. You know, he won't be infected anymore. This was never filmed, and the creative team decided against it because how do you scrape every drop of blood from someone's veins? Like, you can't. Like, if one drop of blood can turn you infected, it's not worth it. Trying to do a transfusion. That probably isn't going to work. So that was never filmed. So yeah.
Sorry, can I just ask as well, as just while I think about it, as a 28 fan, I always heard, is there a reference to Jim and them, what happened to them in 28 weeks later?
Not that I'm aware of, but there are a few other things in which he's referenced. Yeah,
because I had a vague memory of like you hear a radio thing.
Maybe
and
you do.
And
yeah,
I mean, this is like, it could be a completely different movie, but yeah, they were on a boat or something. That I have a vague recollection of there being like a radio broadcast where you're told that they're on a boat. But this is like me remembering a piece of trivia about a film I'd never seen.
I don't know. Yeah, I'll need to look that up. Maybe, but anyway. So Jim dying in all of these alternate endings is kind of indicative of Boyle and Garland, who both wanted Jim to end the film where he begins, in a hospital. You know, it's supposed to be like this poetic ending. They both prefer the alternate endings, referring to Jim dying as the true ending. What do you guys think?
Should have put it in the film then, mate.
But do you prefer it? Do you prefer the idea of Jim dying, or do you like that he survives?
I mean, I like that he survives just because I liked him.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well. How do you feel, Kate?
Oh, see, don't get me wrong, I do like Jim.
Yeah.
But I don't mind the idea of him dying.
Yeah.
And even don't get me wrong, I love men. But the destruction of masculinity and rage as a concept, I think is quite cool. So then, the future with being women. Yeah,
it's
I
funny.
think it's quite
I've watched
interesting.
this movie 100 times, and then when we watched it the other night, and you commented that it's like a comment on like rage and masculinity. I was
Yeah.
like, I've never heard this before.
Yeah.
So do you want to expand upon that at all? Is there any more to it than?
Well, yeah, because it kind of.
This
like,
is what you study, I should say, by the way.
Yeah, it's
like,
true. I study, femininity, masculinity as
28
constructs
days.
and
You just study
representation.
28
Yeah.
days later.
Yeah.
Just the film. That's all I've ever done. One film, my whole life. Because especially with the military men and their like the extreme masculinity that they're engaged with, and the idea that they want women to rape and to bear them children, and that's
they are the infected. Essentially,
exactly, and that's
ways,
their idea of a future is the enslavement of women.
Yeah.
So instead, like the commentary of the complete destruction of men and women rising up is
So by
repopulate.
Jim dying, it completes their thesis statement.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
That does somewhat make it more attractive to me as a
Yeah.
concept. I see Jim dying as like a regression of the themes of like isolation and what is essential to humanity.
Yeah.
Because the conversation between him and Selena through the whole movie is how he's like, we need each other, and she's
Yeah.
like, I only need myself.
Yeah.
And then she changes, and it's kind of. It's incorrect then. She's incorrect for changing if Jim does die. Anyway.
But that's one of the things I love about horror movies is like the risk that anyone could die.
Yeah.
Like, everyone's up for grabs, and that's
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually felt that in these movies as well. Because a lot of movies, I mean, even though you feel like Jim is as safe as the protagonist, at least until the end of the film. Yeah, there was quite a few times when, especially with the other characters, like the core group, you do feel like they could die at any time. They do kill off some people at surprising times as well.
Yeah, that's true. So, on 28 weeks later, Danny Boyle, who served as a producer, said this about its conception. We were quite taken aback by the phenomenal success of the first film, particularly in America. We saw it as an opportunity to make a second film that already has a built-in audience. We thought it'd be a great idea to try and satisfy that audience again. Now, doesn't that just encapsulate what feels off about 28 weeks later?
yeah.
Yeah.
Made for an American audience. It's real gung-ho.
You could tell straight away as well when like the civilians were breaking through and there were zombies in them, and suddenly the Americans are like, just kill them all, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
like, American.
Yeah. Even just the presence of American characters. It's the presence of American characters, and it's the fact that it's filmed a lot more traditionally than 28 Days Later that just make it feel more Hollywood. But I also think the storytelling is just a bit dumber. There's a couple of like gaudy exposition dumps in the dialogue where they're like, right at the start, they're like, oh, can you imagine if we hadn't sent our kids away on a school trip? And it's like, thank you. And there's plot contrivances like Tammy and Andy, the two kids who are the main characters in the film. They're able to escape the quarantine zone real easily. And it's one of those movies where eventually disaster strikes because characters are just real dumb. Andy,
throughout the whole movie, I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, why are you running away?
Yeah.
It's just the bane of my existence.
And what's frustrating is like what I like about 28 Days Later is I like every character in it for whatever reason, except maybe Hannah, who's kind of a pretty crap actress in the film as well.
I was real surprised
If you
by that.
listen to the DVD commentary of 28 Days Later when Hannah comes into the film, you hear Danny Boyle and whoever else is on the commentary try and like put it nicely that they realize afterwards that she's not the greatest actress. And with this, I really like Rose Byrne's character. I really like Jeremy Renner's character. I really like Robert Carlyle. And I don't like him as a person, but his presence in the film at the start, he chooses to run away instead of save his wife, and that's like a killing the cat moment that hangs over his character the whole movie, and then he becomes a zombie. But the characters of Tammy and Andy are so uninteresting. They're your classic annoying kids from a Jurassic Park movie kind of thing,
Yeah. I do like Imogen Poots, though.
Yeah. Did you like her in this specifically?
Man, she's fine.
Yeah. It's more Andy that's the annoying one. The
Kids
younger
are
they
just
get.
stupid.
So yeah, I do really like the opening scene of this movie, which is where Robert Carlyle ditches his wife. It's a great welcome back to the world, and and when I said with 28 Days Later how I would say that first big scene is the best scene until the climactic scene, this is the best scene in 28 Weeks Later is where it begins. And I don't think it quite reaches those heights. Ultimately, though, it kind of feels like a film that spends too much. I'm just going to read verbatim what I'm trying to do without trying to dress up my voice at all. Ultimately, it kind of feels like the film spends too much time in the first half setting things up and then really quickly wraps things up and kills off all the cool characters just as things are getting interesting. You know, Jeremy Renner's death is like
crime.
He's such a hero. He's such a cool character, and then when he dies, you're like, oh, this must be the end of the movie.
Yeah, I forgot that he died, and I thought he was going to make it.
Yeah. and then Rose Byrne dies as well. And you're like, oh, shit, okay, we definitely are wrapping things up now. And I really like those characters, and I really like how it's a converging storyline kind of movie as well. And it almost feels like it would be better suited to a TV show than a movie, which brings us to continue the franchise. All right. So the series has been continued on already in a couple of ways, including a graphic novel, which I bought once when I was 16, called 28 Days Later, The Aftermath.
And look at you now.
Look, I sold it.
You sell out.
There's also a comic series, which I had to read online because I couldn't find physical copies of it. And I read that when I was like 18, just called 28 Days Later, both of which take place in between the two sequels. Aftermath follows a completely different collection of characters, while the comic series follows a now solo Selena, with Jim and Hannah absent and her entire character development from the first film reset. Like she's chapter 1 Selena the whole time. I've read both of them years and years ago. I don't remember a lot about them, but I remember not liking either of them that much.
Nice.
I remember there is a frame in a flashback in the 28 Days Later comic series where you see Jim, Selena, and Hannah, and from memory, they like get picked up after the events of the first film, but then they get caught up in so much immigration kind of shit that they get split up for whatever reason. And from memory, it heavily implies that Jim's dead.
Interesting.
Yeah. So rumblings of 28 months later have been going since the release of Weeks, and I remember feeling in high school like 28 months later, The Dark Knight Rises and The World's End were the 3 movies I'd never see.
Yeah.
You know, like they were the 3 third parts of a beloved series that I loved. I didn't know The Dark Knight Rises was called The Dark Knight Rises at the time, but The World's End title dropped real early, like years before that film came out.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking like, man, these are the movies that my favorite directors have always said that they might do, but they probably never will. It has been so long since the last one of those came out, which was The World's End in like 2013. And 28 months later, still never came out. Every 5 or 6 years, though, it feels like Danny Boyle or Alex Garland make vague statements about it being in production. Plot details have never been revealed, with Boyle stating that if they gave out any plot details, those ideas would end up in The Walking Dead.
Take that, Robert Kirkman, you fat idiot.
In 2015, Garland stated that months would be the likely sequel over years, as there are more places you can go with that story. The most recent update was in June of this year, when Boyle confirmed that he and Garland had recently met to discuss and begin preparation on a third film.
Ooh.
I'm still waiting. Kate, what's your continue the franchise?
Okay. On the back of you saying that 28 years later is not a good idea, I'm going to go with 28 years later.
Well, it's not a good idea.
No.
I do think you need months first, though, surely.
Yeah.
Just for the...
Oh, see, I thought months is a bit predictable, okay? So I'm going to go with 28 years later. Okay. So the world has been completely devastated by the virus, and except for there has been a vaccine created. Yeah. So it's slowly people are repopulating and that kind of thing. Except for the huge issue is that there has been a mass rise in Dianes and Tracy's who are into their crystals and herbs and anti-vaxxing their children.
Oh my God, of course, that's such a good idea.
So all of a sudden now there's all these children who aren't vaccinated going around kissing children who have been vaccinated and immunized with the virus. Yeah, and so it devastates the world again.
It's an anti-vax case study. It's a cautionary tale. I love it. That's so good. 28 years later. Awesome. Richard, what's your idea?
Well, can I hear your idea first? Because I've got 2 and I'll go either way depending on what yours is.
Okay. So my dream for 28 months later, I want to bring Jim back and Selena. I don't care about Hannah. And while like every you know the comics and the vibe I get in the alternate endings, everyone seems to really want Jim to be dead, but I really love Cillian Murphy, and I really think Jim is what makes that first film so special, at least one of the things. And he'd be the connective tissue that would make it feel like it's the third part of a series instead of just another zombie movie. You know, how is it a sequel if it doesn't have the same characters? Like, why specify it's 28 months later if you're not going to bring back the characters or the reasons we loved the first film? That being said, as I hinted before, I am kind of intrigued to see what this world would look like in a TV show. Like, all the actors are kind of... You can get them for a TV show. Like, you know, you can get... Cillian Murphy's in Peaky Blinders at the moment. Naomi
although
Harris
he does look significantly older these days.
Yeah, that's true. And I just want to explore more of the world and more of unimportant nobody survivors. But in a TV show, it would feel more forgivable to then be like, and here are the really important characters who are on their way to stopping. You know,
multiple storylines.
Yeah. I'd want to recreate the tone and style of the original and potentially just even call it 28 Days Later. Or 28 minutes later. And maybe that's the length of each episode.
Nice.
Maybe the episodes take place in real time and as a series of 28-minute increments to a larger story.
That's cool.
Nice, that's very cool. Okay, so I've always had kind of 28 Days Later is one of those franchises I'm weirdly invested in. Despite having never seen the films, you know, I always wanted there to be a 28 months later, and maybe it's because I like the titles and things like that, and I wanted to see where they would go with it. But I think one thing that's like important for a 28 sequel is I like that they follow the virus in a way. I remember you and I were watching a Cinefix video together, and I had no idea what anything about 28 weeks was later. What later was about, and they said it was like an unconventional sequel. And I remember you having quite a panic attack, quite loudly about that, where I couldn't hear the next 10, 15 seconds of the video. And I was like, oh, like there must be such a mistake. Like if it's got the main characters back, it follows the storyline, and you're like, no, it doesn't have any of that. I'm like, well, okay, then I don't get what your problem is. But because it is an unconventional sequel, it's following a theme or a setting rather than any characters. But I think that it's cool to just see society in these different places, and who we're following is kind of incidental.
So you're almost pitching the opposite to what I said.
Yeah,
in a way. That's cool. Though.
Yeah, like when you said, "Oh, we need to go back to Jim to feel like the third part to a series." I completely disagree. I think going back to Jim makes 28 weeks an odd one out.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But so the ones I would like to see, you kind of hinted at it at 28 minutes later. I'd like to see 28 seconds later.
Oh, yeah.
Immediately, well, not immediately, 28 seconds later, after the outbreak, we kind of see a little bit at the start, and maybe, you know, the story's not super interesting, that's why they haven't made it, but the waking up in a hospital, you know, Walking Dead and 28 Days Later both use it, and they came out in the same year, the original comic of Walking Dead. They actually, a lot of zombie movies either use it's not important how it started, or you're with a character who missed the start of it. Even Fear the Walking Dead, which was billed as being like, you'll get to see the outbreak, did a time jump very early on. And it's like, I'd like to see that initial, oh shit, what's happening? Because we see in 28 Days, like, newspaper clippings of all the stuff that happened, but it's like, you know, let's see society trying to move on when this is like spreading. And then on the flip side of that, I'm with Kate in that I quite like the idea of doing 28 years, going like further into the future than 28 months, because I feel like weeks to months isn't, you know, not super new. But give me 28,000 years later.
28 decades later. 28 millennia later.
Yeah. I would love to see a world, 28 centuries later is a good one, where it's like, Yeah, give us so far into the future that like maybe the population's completely died out. Maybe England's completely uninhabitable. And just see society when there was this super violent event generations earlier that culled a massive part of the population.
Cool.
Yeah,
And it's all because of bloody animal rights activists.
So those are my two ideas.
Very cool. Very nice. Sweet. Well, that probably brings us to the end of our conversation about one of my favourite films of all time and its sequel. Kate, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Is there anything you would like to plug or promote while you're here?
No,
That's all good. You don't have to.
I don't.
You can just plug Cult Pop Show if you want.
Yeah, check out Cult Pop Shirt. Check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. You can email us. Join the
What's
Patreon.
the email? What's the email address?
cultpopshire@gmail.com.
What? What's cultpopshiremedia@gmail.com?
Oh, brilliant, man.
How often have I said
The amount of times
that?
I've heard it as well. Oh,
All right. Thank you, everybody,
Disappointment.
for listening, and we'll be going on to the next part of this episode right now. Hell yeah. All right. Hello, everybody. And we are here with one of our favorite and oldest fans. Not oldest in terms of how old she is, but oldest in terms of someone who's stuck it out through the not so great years of Cult Popture into the maybe all right years of Cult Popture. How are you going, Sarah?
Good. Enjoying it every minute.
Cool. Sarah, or as listeners of our show might more commonly hear you referred to as Maisel Mies. Is that correct?
Yes.
Am I saying it right?
You are.
Yeah, or they've probably more commonly heard Maisel Mise.
Yeah, Maisel Mise, as we for some reason assumed.
No one gets it right. It's fine.
Yeah.
So welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for, having me. Thanks.
All good. So we're going to be talking about an American werewolf in London and an American werewolf in Paris. There wasn't too much thought into the fact that you're American and getting you on an American, but I don't know. It can work if you want it to work.
No, there definitely was.
Sure.
Yeah. Have you ever been to London or Paris?
I've been to London, not Paris.
Are you a werewolf?
It's not last time I checked.
Wow.
All right. When was the last time you checked? Was it since the last full moon? Because you might need to check again.
That's true.
Yeah, I haven't been bitten lately. I think chances are good that I'm safe.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Well, we'll check back in a couple months.
Yeah. The first film, An American Werewolf in London, came out in 1981, and it was directed by John Landis. Do you guys want to take guesses as to what An American Werewolf in London has on Rotten Tomatoes?
Sarah, do you want to go first?
I think it was higher rated than the first one. Oh, God, like
This is the first one.
45, or sorry, second one. 45%.
Okay. Richard, any guesses?
I think it's like a horror classic, so I'm going to guess around like 75 to 80.
It is 87%, yeah.
Nice.
So pretty highly rated. And Richard, or Maisel Mies, or Sarah, what should we call you
Just
now
call
that
me
we're
Sarah.
talking to you in person?
It's much more
Okay.
concise.
Sweet. Richard, what is An American Werewolf in London about?
So, two backpackers, David and Jack, backpacking through the UK when they're attacked by what appears to be some kind of wolf. Jack gets killed and David is injured. He wakes up in a hospital a few weeks later with little memory of what happened. His buddy Dave, who's now dead and a ghost, visits him a few times and explains that Jack's now a werewolf. The ghost friend tells him to kill himself because he'll be forced to be a ghost until the bloodline of the werewolf that killed him is gone. So then David is eventually discharged from the hospital and he moves in with the nurse that had the hots for him. Eventually he does transform into a werewolf and quite a cool, I would say, transformation scene with lots of like practical effects. It's quite fun. And then so he kills people and then he tries to turn himself in, but the bobbies That's what they
Yes.
call the cops.
Oh.
Don't believe him. Eventually, he transforms again in an adult movie theater and begins another rampage before being shot and killed, dying in his human form in front of the nurse, Alex.
Yeah. Thank you for a very succinct but
Very
thorough
thorough.
explanation of the film. Have you written a synopsis for the second one, Richard?
I have, but if Ms. Velling wants to do it.
Well, An American Werewolf in Paris came out in 1997, which how many years later is that?
16.
It's 16, damn.
Too many.
that was directed by Anthony Waller. What do we think that has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I know this is like a famously bad, like sub 10, I think, Rotten Tomatoes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is it like 5%?
It is 7%. And if you want to give it a go, you can try tell us what it's about, Sarah.
Oh God! So a couple of bros, three dudes are headed to Paris. They're on a, what they called it, like the Daredevil tour or something like that. And one of them's like, "I'm gonna jump off the Eiffel Tower as a surprise," but a girl tries to jump off. He jumps off after her. He saves her life because he's got his bungee cord on. His friends somehow stop him from dying by holding it. And he falls in love with this girl he just met. She ends up being a werewolf. He gets involved in her family drama. Chaos ensues. And the werewolves of Paris want to kill Americans. And
So the main guy becomes a werewolf from hanging out with this girl. One of their friends is killed, and it's the same sort of thing as the first one where his dead friend keeps revisiting him and telling him that he needs to kill and eat the heart of like the werewolf that made him a werewolf or something like that.
So if he eats the heart of the werewolf that bit him, it will cure him of his werewolfness, and then also killing that werewolf by doing that will let his buddies like go free.
Yeah.
Also, I love,
like
Sarah, how you started that, because I'd written down an explanation, and the first thing I'd written was some bros are doing some sightseeing.
I think they're self-described douchebags. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So, which of these films was your favourite? There's a very clear critical consensus, but, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, no matter how unpopular that opinion may be. What do you guys think? What's your favourites?
While I very much enjoyed the first one a lot more. I thought the first one was cool. It was like a simple, like the effects were cool, and it's just like a fun, cool 80s movie. And then the second one has probably more in common with something like Queen of the Damned than the first film, and it was just kind of annoying.
Interesting. Okay, Sarah, what were your thoughts?
I also like the first one more just because I think it was a better movie. It was weirdly paced, and I mean it ended so I don't like the ending. I've got problems with the ending. So and nothing was ever explained. Like those Nazi goblins in his dream just weren't important at all, and I kept waiting for that to come back. In the second one, they go into more in depth in the world. Like there's more things explained, but it's also poorly made. So
they're both very strange movies. I thought they both had a lot of like, because I in a way I'm very impressed that they had both like ghost zombies in a movie about werewolves, which maybe doesn't need to have more than one like monster kind of thing in it, but even then, like the world building is so strange. When in the first one, when Dave gets bitten and he's like lying there semi-unconscious on the ground, he looks over and he sees a naked old man lying next to him, and it wasn't until I looked it up that I understood that that's the werewolf who's just bit him transforming back into a human. And so the whole movie I was like, why did he hallucinate an old naked man lying next to him? But yeah, so I'm not going to say I thought Paris was better than London, But
Here we
I
go.
thought Paris was great. I really enjoyed, but I thought the way they extrapolated and built upon the lore and the mythology was perfectly valid, and it reminded me a bit of how everyone acts like Ghostbusters 2 is some like travesty of a sequel when it's, I don't know, I think it's fine.
It's good.
Yeah. So I don't know. I certainly didn't think there was an 80% drop in quality, as the critics would indicate, between the two films. And I liked that, like, the first one is like, you've got to kill yourself so that you end the line, so that me and all the other people who you've killed can pass on to the other side. And in Paris, it's like there's a few more factors in play around that same idea. So like he does kill someone who wants him to die as a ghost, and she keeps trying to, lure him into oncoming traffic and stuff like that, which was really cool. And he also finds out at some point that he has to kill the woman he's in love with, who's a werewolf. And it's, I don't know. I just thought they
like
took those
drug that accelerates the transformation.
Yeah.
And then adrenaline stops that.
Yeah.
So they start living adrenaline-fueled 90s lives together.
Did you guys enjoy when Smash Mouth started playing in An American
yes.
Werewolf in Paris?
All the music in these movies is so appropriate, and I love that.
Yeah.
It's just
great.
so on the nose.
You got like Bad Moon Rising and
oh my god, that was so
in
good.
London.
I love
My
that.
major grievance with the first movie is, though, that the whole time I was waiting for Werewolves of London to play.
I was about to say that.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
expecting it, and I was hoping, and then the ending like credits played, and I was like, this would have been the perfect moment. Instead, they played their third edition, like third variation of Blue Moon instead of Werewolves of London. It was a less popular song than Bad Moon Rising, so it's not like it was more expensive. But
Yeah, I just assumed that like Werewolves of London was written for the movie or something like that. Like
it wasn't. It came out before.
Yeah, I just
so
assumed
angry.
that the two were linked or something, but no, they have nothing to do with each other.
Well, that's an interesting point to bring up, because did you guys know much about these movies before watching them?
No.
I'd seen the transformation sequence before, and so I knew it was like, and like I said, I think that like that it was like this 80s horror classic and with a terrible sequel kind of thing. Because Max Landis, John Landis' son, like did a like a remake of the like a shot for shot remake of the transformation scene with him in the as David.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, because I knew very little about these. I'd heard the titles, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I kind of assumed they were the same movie, and that I just kept getting the title wrong whenever I remembered it. And one of the reasons I did want to cover it for our exclusive fan 2-film episodes, holiday episodes that we do, was because there's such a pairing together. It's like, we'll talk about titles later, but I think the titles are very effective in conveying the I don't know. What am I trying to say? I think they're cool titles. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that we got you on, Sarah, is because you've got a degree in costume design. Is that correct?
I do. That is correct.
Yeah. Very cool. Now, I know costume design isn't exactly what these movies are famous for, but as a costume designer, did you admire the practical effects of the werewolves and that kind of thing? Was there any insight you can offer as someone in like the art direction world around that kind of thing?
I do think the practical effects were great. I mean, obviously, like the full werewolf that was like kind of animatronic, it looked a little cheesy, but that's what happens. The makeup though was amazing. Like Jack's throat is terrifying.
Oh.
Like, if the sex didn't earn the R rating, that earned the R rating. Like,
yeah.
For sure.
So he appears as a zombie ghost to torment Dave, and the first time you see him, his throat's been ripped open, and you can see his larynx and its skin like flapping around. It looks very cool.
And that's one of the things they try to do in the sequel as well, but it's just not quite as good.
Yeah,
No,
that's true. And also, they use CGI in the sequel instead of practical effects, which I think is one of the reasons why it wasn't particularly favourable with critics, is because the first one was this landmark of practical effects, and the second one did away with that completely with not terrible early 90s CGI, for the time, but still very clearly, terrible for today's standards.
Dated.
It's more... Yeah, it's more a case of you shouldn't have been trying to do this in 1997. So according to Entertainment Weekly, the real star of the film is the Oscar-winning transformation effects by Rick Baker. So I feel like we should acknowledge his name and mention his name. Yeah, they say it changed the face of horror makeup in the 1980s. And the Daily Telegraph stated that it was that American Werewolf in London is the first mainstream hit which managed to make its gross-out effects simultaneously shocking and hilarious, and called the signature werewolf transformation scene stunningly ingenious, without a computer effect in sight, but also suffused with squirm-inducing agony.
Yes.
The Telegraph also cites an American Werewolf in London as inspiring such films as Beetlejuice, Gremlins, and Evil Dead 2. The last two of which we've covered on the podcast, and it also Edgar Wright has also said that An American Werewolf in London is a major inspiration for him, which you can see in films such as Shaun of the Dead. And stuff like that.
For sure. Like the blending of horror and comedy, I think is it's really good in this film.
Yeah, nice. So let's talk about titles, because we do that a lot on this podcast, and I've already said I think they're cool. And the reason I think they're cool is because this is kind of like my favorite titling convention, is taking the first title and changing one word so that it's still linked. Shanghai Noon, Shanghai Nights, that kind of thing. And I think I'm surprised they only made two in a way, because the format kind of opens itself up to be, never ending almost.
Well, but it's funny because like if they'd done it like the same amount of time, the most recent one would have come out in 2013.
There you go. So when production... Well, this is a fun fact. When production for the original London film ran into trouble with British Equity, John Landis, having scouted locations in Paris, considered moving the production to France and changing the title of the film to An American Werewolf in Paris. So that's, I guess, how they came up with the idea almost, is they were just like, let's... this is the backup if we can't get London. So that's pretty cool.
Neat.
Yeah. Neat.
Yeah. Funky.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
I like that. But then they sat on it for like 16 years. So
yeah, they were just like, that's a good idea, and then no one did anything about it. And then 16 years later, they're like, remember that cool idea that John Landis had? I'm like, oh yeah, let's do that.
Oh yeah.
That's how more sequels should be made. More sequels should just be the deleted first drafts or alternate
John
drafts
of known director and murderer John Landis.
Is he a murderer?
Yeah.
What did he do?
He killed those kids on the Twilight Zone set. I mean, it wasn't him deliberately, but it was kind of his fault.
Oh.
So it's more manslaughter than...
Yeah, for sure. But, and then he gave birth, well, he didn't give birth to, but he his son...
He begot.
His son,
Max Landis.
Isn't one of the best people in Hollywood.
No. Well, before we do get to that, we're actually getting to it now for our final segment of this little mini episode, which is Continue the Franchise, where we all pitch our own sequels and stuff like that. So there was a 1997 BBC radio show of the first one, like a remake of it. And since 2009, there have been rumblings of a remake of the original film being made. And as you say, Richard, most recently, Max Landis, who's the son of John Landis, he said on Twitter in 2017 that he had finished a draft of the script with plans to direct. He would have said this on Twitter mere months before several accusations of sexual harassment came out against him, and has been lying low ever since, with nary a comment nor a passing glance at remaking an American Werewolf in London.
Yeah, so he because some stuff came out about him in 2016, and then that kind of blew over a little bit, and he started sort of like, tweeting and going on Reddit like a little bit, and then it was like in June this year there was like a massive wave of like people actually like calling him a rapist, and his ex-girlfriend like came out and said, all this other stuff about him. Because it was
Wow.
like just I think in 2016 it was just like a little bit like rumors of people being like, yeah, apparently he's not a great guy, but in June of this year it was like, these are actual things he did, kind of thing.
Right.
Shit.
Interesting. Yeah. It's always the Landises. It's always the the Landises causing trouble and controversy. So, who wants to go first? Who wants to pitch their sequel first?
Well, I'll go first, just so Sarah's not intimidated or scared by having to give hers.
Appreciate you.
So mine is a miniseries or a TV series called American Werewolf, and it's essentially like and the main character of it is the curse, and we follow it so each episode would be called like In London or In Paris or in Auckland.
Right.
Ooh.
And yeah, it's like a globe-trotting adventure of this this like werewolf curse, and so maybe the main characters would be like people investigating it, kind of thing, and so they're forced to like follow these murders that sound eerily similar all across the globe. Yeah,
very cool. All right, thank you, Richard. Sarah, what is your idea?
Mine is an American Werewolf in Venice, because it's 2 syllables and Rome is not 2 syllables.
Very true.
And I feel like there has to be a pattern in the
love it.
The natural vein of like werewolf stories, right? There's a dude, like all the other dudes, young guy going on a trip.
With his
and
bros.
he meets a sexy vampire chick, because that's where the story would go next, naturally, right? And then there's like a werewolf chick who saves him from this vampire chick, but he's already been bitten, and in a very underworld twist, he's suddenly both. And it's all about how the werewolves hate the vampires, and it's Venice, so obviously someone has to drown, and yes.
Yeah. Someone has to drown in Venice.
Yeah.
That's it feels like a very natural progression to take a werewolf story. This is one of the only werewolf stories I can think of that doesn't involve vampires at any point. Doesn't even like acknowledge their existence. Where it feels
that's
like
a good point.
The two should be hand in hand.
Yeah,
Cool.
they hint at like a larger universe, right? With like the I don't know, weird visions he has, and the ghouls and shit.
Yeah. Cool. Well, my Continue the Franchise, guys, is based off a little throwaway line in the first film where they before the wolf attacks Jack and Dave, they go into a pub and they hear a old English man tell a joke, and the joke is, I'm approximating it here, but it's basically a plane's about to crash because it's too heavy, and so the Frenchman on board yells "Vive la France" and jumps out the plane, but it's still too heavy. So the British person on board goes, was it like "For the Queen" or something, and jumps out, but it's still too heavy. And then the American stands up and goes, "Remember the Alamo," and throws out the Mexican. So that's the joke. And so, we've seen France and we've seen London, the two other demographics represented, and he's American, which is the other demographic. So let's watch an American werewolf in Mexico City, which is what is the capital of Mexico. And I found out while you were detailing your Continue the Franchise, Sarah, I was like, wait, what is the capital of Mexico? And I looked it up, and it's one of the most it doesn't sound good, an American werewolf in Mexico City. I think I assumed it would be like El Paso, but that's in Texas.
Yeah. Well, you could do like an American werewolf in Tijuana.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. An American werewolf in
Guadalajara.
Yeah.
What about in Chihuahua, which is an actual Mexican city?
Oh my gosh. An American Chihuahua in London.
That's it.
That's my continued franchise. Yeah, so it's just that. It's just I thought that's a cool way to take it, is to represent. I mean, you could just go wherever you want with this.
An American werewolf in America.
Oh my god.
I thought about New York, then I was like, that doesn't make any sense with their titling scheme.
Yeah, a British werewolf in New York.
Yeah, that's the other way to go, right? an English werewolf in Washington.
Washington.
What? It would be. That's the capital of America, right, Sarah?
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C., yes.
Washington State
Not
is
Washington
a different
State.
thing. It's very far away from Washington.
Are they
DC as
different?
well. Yes.
Yes, Washington.
Where's Washington,
the
D.C.?
District of Columbia is like, it's on the eastern seaboard, whereas Washington State is on the northwestern.
Yeah.
Wait, so what state is DC in?
It's its own. It's like the Vatican, where it's its own little thing. It's its
Really?
own independent city, but it's
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's 50 states plus DC.
and Puerto
Oh my
Rico.
god.
And Puerto Rico.
And other.
This is blowing my
Panama.
mind, guys. I was not ready for such revelations. Cool. Well, that's about all we've got time for this little segment. We'll be moving on. Or
There
maybe
is
we've
one,
moved on to this one.
segment we haven't done. And that is
Yes.
when we have American guests on the podcast.
I can't do voices. I'm real bad.
Can you do a
I'm not
voice?
an actor. I can't do accents. No.
What is your approximation of a New Zealand accent? All right. Shall we give her a sentence to say, Richard?
Yeah.
So you can just copy us. All right. Your sentence is an American werewolf in London.
An American. I can't even do it. I can't. Like
You were so close.
This is so much anxiety. Like an American werewolf in London. I can't.
That is the worst attempt we've ever heard. That was like
I don't even have a British accent. How am I supposed to get the slight dialect difference?
That was almost like Irish.
Oh, God.
That was great. Thank you so
we
much,
applaud
Sarah.
the effort and we're sorry for making you uncomfortable.
Christ. I'm sorry.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on, Sarah. Is there anything that you would like people to check out? Like, do you want to plug your Instagram or anything like
Your
that?
YouTube channel?
Oh, sure. It's Maesolmese on everything, which is MAESOLMESE.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go follow her and tell her how good her accent work is. Thanks, Sarah. See you later.
Okay, bye.
All right. Continue being welcomed to the podcast as this is midway through it, or it's not because I don't know what order we're putting these in. But we're here. We're talking about Happy Death Day, and we've got our good friend Brianna with us.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Brie. How you going?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good.
Good. And I believe we've also got an audience for this episode. Is that right?
We do. My wife is here. Her name is Maddie. She's like the backbone of my entire life.
Oh, that is bar none the most sentimental thing that has ever been said on this podcast. Why don't you ever call Jess the backbone of your life, Richard?
Because she's not.
Oh. Motherfucker, I'm out here with no backbone, and you're just like, yeah, whatever.
Honestly, I don't know how single people do it.
I agree with you. I've sent letters to the commissioner of
Women.
couples, of women in general.
Yeah.
I always like.
I
to
loved Joker. Sorry.
I always like to tell people that I have to work at 6:45 in the morning, and Maddie gets up with me at 5 a.m. and makes me porridge before I go to work, and then she does the dishes and hangs out the washing. And I'm just the luckiest person alive.
And then just waits for you to get home.
Yeah. the single man version of that is I get up at midday every day and maybe I'll have a shower. The single life, baby, nothing like it. All right, Happy Death Day. Let's do it.
Yeah, Happy Death Day. So this is a duology of two films.
Cool.
That is Happy Death Day and the brilliantly titled Happy Death Day to You. That's 2, the number 2, and U, the letter U. Like U2, but backwards. So these came out in
Happy
2017.
birthday, you two.
These came out in 2017 and 2019, that being this year. And they're both directed by Christopher Landon. And so, who wants to take the first film?
Well, one of them's more complicated.
Yeah.
Which one do you want to do, Brie? I'll let you choose.
Oh, I'll do the first one.
Cool.
So, a summary, yeah?
Yeah. Just it doesn't have to be too detailed.
So, Tree is the main character. She wakes up to her normal sorority life in a man's bed in his dorm room, and then proceeds to kind of rush out and do the walk of shame. And we find out that she's kind of a shitty person. And then later that night, she is attacked after she sees a little music box playing Happy Birthday because it's her birthday. And then she's murdered. And then boom, she wakes up again, same day. And she keeps reliving the same day and her murder until she figures out who the murderer is and can put a stop to the murderer and the time loop.
Yeah, so it's Groundhog Day, but scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote like Groundhog Day meets a slasher.
Yeah.
Groundhog Day meets Scream.
Yeah, because the killer is Babyface.
Yes, and it was made by the same guy who designed Ghostface.
It was.
Giving you a run for your bloody money, Richard.
I love IMDb trivia, and I didn't know I wasn't supposed to read it.
That's fine.
There are no rules anymore.
Yeah.
When we first started doing this, it was like, don't look up anything, Richard. And now it's like...
Yeah, like if we
I
wanted to
couldn't
know
stop
who an actor was, you had to like message the other person and be like,
Yeah.
can you look up who this person is?
Couldn't you just watch the credits?
While watching the movie, I guess.
But now it's,
that's
like...
a good solution.
Yeah. Also, it's not for every film, but Amazon Prime has this like annotation feature where like especially if you're watching like something made by Amazon Prime, if you open up the app while you're watching it, it tells you the name of every actor in that scene and like the song that's playing and like all this shit. So that if you're like,
Wow.
That's such a cool feature.
It's such a good.
The future
good
is
idea.
now.
All right. So
I almost want to sign up for Amazon Prime again.
Yeah. You got The Boys and Fleabag. And Good Omens. There's a few shows on there. Their movie selection is real bad though. But I just found out they have the first 3 Screams, but they don't have the 4th one. Or the TV series, which is what I was looking for. Anyway, happy Death Day to you, AJ. Over to you for the synopsis.
Okay, so it's the time loop gets broken at the end of the first film, and we see the next day, and the roommate of the love interest in the first film is now experiencing the same thing for himself. He's looping a day over and over, getting killed.
His name is Ryan.
His name is Ryan. The flatmate's name
is Ryan. The love interest is Carter.
Carter.
Yeah.
What a great name.
And there's Laurie and Danielle.
Very good. I mean, when we started this podcast, we're like, we'll memorize every character's name. We'll never refer to like actor's character. You know, we would never be like,
that's so hard.
Jim Carrey's character and da 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 da. We were talking about Jim Carrey before as well.
Jim Carrey's character in Ace Ventura.
Anyway, So it is. I won't get bogged down because it's got a very dense beginning, and then it gets a lot more simple.
Yeah.
Basically, Tree ends up reliving the time loop again of that original day, but now she's in a parallel dimension where she and Carter aren't together. Huh?
You skipped over quite a lot there.
Yeah, well,
like, what the reason for the time loop in the first film was revealed as well.
Yeah, okay, so it explains it. Yeah, there's a science project gone awry, a quantum physics machine.
Sissy and Sisyphus, or Sissy or Sisyphus.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And so now Tree is stuck in a parallel dimension where Carter is now with Danielle instead of her, and her mum is still alive.
Oh.
And it becomes like a morality tale of what...
I totally knew where they were going with that, and I was like, "That's so mean."
Yeah.
I mean, spoilers for the end of the film. It kind of becomes, in my opinion anyway, it kind of becomes like the problem of her not having Carter could very easily go away in one dimension, but they don't really talk about that. And then then she just goes back to her real dimension. Yeah, so I did skip a lot at the start. The kind of way I came to think of it was that the first one is like a horror movie about someone who's reliving the day they die over and over again, and it's irrelevant why she's in a time loop. And then the second one is almost solely devoted to explaining the science behind it, which I actually appreciated, because while something like Groundhog Day, I don't think you need to have the reason for the time loop explained to you. I think because it was someone getting murdered that started a time loop, I was like, I feel like I need to know why this is happening. Because in Groundhog Day, just wakes up and it's the previous day. And in Happy Death Day, it's she has to get killed in order to restart again. So I did appreciate that the sequel just went, yep, here's why.
I mean, I really like the sequel, but I kept watching the sequel and going, well, sure, the time loop was created by Sisyphus, but why Tree? Why Ryan? Like, Ryan, I guess, makes sense because he made he could have been exposed to something, but why Tree?
And at the start of Happy Death Day to You, when Ryan's in the time loop, he gets murdered by a new baby face, so they then find out is Ryan from another timeline, and I was like, this is getting real weird and interesting, and then it drops it completely when she goes to the parallel dimension. I was like, but why was there another Ryan? Do we know that the answer to that? Does it explain that and I just missed it?
Well, he's from the parallel universe. Well, because they say that there's 6 dimensions, but we only see 2 of them.
Right.
I remember that being a thing.
They're the Stranger Things explanation.
Yeah, my analysis of the second film is a lot of promising stuff that ultimately I feel could have gone in maybe a different way that it went.
Yeah, it almost felt like there was more than one film seed there.
Yeah.
And then they were like, we gotta pick one.
Yeah.
So, generally speaking, what did you guys think of the films? Because I had seen them before. I watched Happy Death Day at the end of last year, I think. I just chucked on a random movie and then went to go see Happy Death Day to You opening night because I loved the first one. And I dragged Jess along, who...
the backbone of
my life. Dragged her along. She hadn't seen the first one. But it does recap it at the start of the second one.
Yeah.
But... and I really enjoyed them. I actually think I enjoyed the second one a lot more watching it a second time as well. Because I remember, the first one is just so much, to me anyway, is just so much fun. And then the second one is so much more ambitious. But, they do a lot of things really well in it that you wouldn't expect them to do that well.
Yeah.
And they have no right to do it that well, or like
it's the only time like a time loop Groundhog Day movie and that very small collection of films. It's the only time one of them has had a sequel, I think.
Yeah,
like
probably.
when I think of other time loop movies, they usually steer clear of sequels for obvious reasons, and so I think for that alone, it's quite an interesting film.
Yeah.
But what did you think overall, Brie, of the films?
I really had a fun experience watching them because I went in completely blind. I remember seeing the movie posters, but I didn't watch a trailer. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I just sat down and I was like, cool. And it started and I met Tree as a character and I was like, great, a shallow sorority bitch. This'll be fun. And then was pleasantly surprised.
She'll never learn her lesson by the end of the arc of the film.
Yeah. And I thought it was just going to be another slasher film full of dumb old tropes and stereotypes about naked women getting murdered in stupid scenarios where they never defend themselves.
Yeah. But then by the end
Boy,
of the
were you
film,
pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. By the end of the film, did you fall madly in love with Jessica Rothe?
I did. And I was surprised.
Yeah.
It started off because she looks like Blake Lively, in my opinion, and I think Blake Lively is so beautiful. But she's super funny, and I love the scene where she walks naked through the campus. I just love that she's like, well, fuck it. If I'm gonna die, let's have fun with it.
Yeah.
What a fantastic
every
thing.
movie like this has that one where they stop caring. Like Groundhog Day's full of it. But I feel like I can't talk about this movie without like just stating what like an incredible like screen presence Jessica Rothe is. Like
she
came
made the
out
film.
of nowhere kind of thing to just be like because she is playing such a horrible character, but you just fall in love with her. She's just so electric on screen, and it's. I mean, I'm not sure because this is like a leading role, but I hope that she kind of gets the because she could be. I feel like she's like the next Emma Stone kind of thing, that similar kind of thing. I think it's probably actually about the same age as Emma Stone, but and she's in La La Land as well. But
I don't remember her in La La Land, but I was like, oh my God,
she's just one of her
rewatch.
friends in the like Getting Ready song.
She looks like the amalgamation of like some women I know in my life as well as some famous women I know about.
Yeah,
like she kind of looks like my flatmate.
Like maybe Blake Lively.
Maybe Blake Lively. She kind of looks like Jenna Marbles, the YouTuber.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Blake Lively meets Jenna Marbles. 100%.
Yeah.
So AJ, what did you think?
I wasn't, incredibly blown away. I don't think I liked it as much as you, Richard, but it was cool. I liked it. It was fun.
I think that checks out, like, from listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
The fact that I side with Richard more than AJ seems to be fair.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sorry,
all right.
13 going on 30.
The second one, as I said, when it started, I was like, hell yeah, this is so interesting. And I almost want to say I don't think I do like it more. I don't know if I have a favorite because the first one's just so simple and clean, and then the second one is so experimental and takes risks and does some really interesting stuff that, as we said, is kind of feels like a mixed bag of ideas as opposed to one clear idea. But whatever those ideas are, on their own, are almost worth making the sequel.
That's kind of it. It sort of makes sense that it would be a mixed bag of ideas because it's a mixed bag of timelines and dimensions and like one character from a different dimension. And
I think because by the time they got to the dimension swapping, it was like that was maybe the third or fourth wrinkle that added, and I was like, yeah, keep giving wrinkles, like keep changing. Like when she got to the other dimension, I was like on board, and I was like, I want this movie to get fucking weird. Like I want this to go to the most insane places, and then it kind of just stayed in that zone for the rest of it.
It did, but it was really interesting to build more on that because I think you talk a lot on the podcast about in sequels, like the natural next stage for characters.
Yeah.
And her being faced with the presence of meeting her mom, like the option of meeting her
very
mom,
cool. Yeah.
Is definitely a really interesting place to take it, considering it's time loopy, and now we're talking about time loops and dimensions. So putting that in there and having her have to decide between one future and one past is a super fascinating conundrum.
It's good stuff.
It really,
good stuff, yeah.
It changed genres for me. Like the second, like you were saying, the first movie is a horror movie in this kind of sci-fi subgenre, and then the second movie is like a comedy drama.
Well, I wouldn't even call. I would put
in.
sci-fi on the second one, but not at all on the first one, because she could be reliving that day for a spiritual reason. They don't tell you at all. And so the first one's like Groundhog Day if it's a horror movie, and then the second one's like a sci-fi, not even really horror. But they're both
there's
really
like
cool.
3 murdery scenes.
There's the in the second one when she's at dinner at lunch with her dad, and then her mum shows up. They were sitting in the cinema. I was like, "Fuck yes, this is like the best way to take this." Because in the first one, the death of her mum is kind of just used to give reason to her strained relationship with her dad. Because the phone call she keeps getting, which wakes her up every morning, is from her dad, and she ignores it almost every loop. But yeah, and then it's kind of a reference that her mum's not there anymore. But it's such an interesting subplot to the film, and it adds this whole because the first one is like number one, it's like a Groundhog Day time loop film. Number 2, it's a slasher film, and then number 3, it's like a rom-com of her and Carter, and then the second one now replaces that like rom-com love story with this like mother-daughter love story, and it's got this surprising amount of heart, and it gives Jessica Roth a lot more to do, like acting wise. There's a lot like heavier and like deeper. I mean, it's one thing to scream for your life every few seconds, but that like when she sees her mum, that reaction shot of her, I thought that was great.
Yeah, I agree. And I really liked that. Like the movies, both of them are really cleverly written. I was taking notes while I was watching them and I kept asking questions and then the movie kept answering the questions that I was asking. Like in the first movie when there's a scene where she bars herself in. I was like, fuck yeah, fight back, bar yourself in your room.
Yeah.
And then the killer's in the room. I was like, you're telling me a serial killer stalker was in her room for like presumably 4 or 5 hours and she didn't notice. And then you find out who the killer is and it's like, nope, yep, that checks out.
Yeah, and it does pull, it kind of has a red herring where you think the killer is this escaped convict. And then you find out it's her roommate who's...
Well, it is the escaped convict, but she was letting him out,
Yeah, her roommate was letting her out because her roommate's jealous of her.
I think it's not. It's never the escaped convict. The escaped convict only ever attacks her when she confronts him as the escaped convict. Every other time, it's Glory.
Right. Okay, maybe. I don't remember well enough.
Because it doesn't make sense for anyone else to be stalking her at school and know where she's going to be. And also that it's her birthday. Because when she's at the hospital and then gets away in the car and then gets blown up, it's with the birthday candle. So that doesn't make sense for him to be doing it. It makes sense for Laurie to be doing it.
Yeah. But it is very brave of the movie to fully commit to making you think that the villain is a Deus Ex Machina for a long time. Like, I got to the point where I was like, I guess it's just a random out of the blue character who's the killer. All right.
I was almost pissed because I was like, if they end the movie this way, fuck it. It's a dumb movie. They ruined something really good.
Yeah.
And then she wakes up again and I was like, yes!
Yeah, let's see where it's taking us now,
Yeah, that's so good. So, what do you guys reckon has on Rotten Tomatoes? Brown, I feel like you may have already looked it up.
I have as well, so we're all just not talking about it now.
All right. Well,
I don't really remember, but I remember thinking the audience score was lower than the critic score, and I was like,
I haven't written down the audience scores, but they are, I'm pretty sure. Well, so the first one is 71%, and then the second one has the funniest number of all, 69%.
Hell yeah, shaka.
Hell yeah. Minute of silence for that number.
I feel like the second one will have a lower score, mostly because people will have watched the first one, expected a horror, and then a sci-fi.
I watched both of them with my friend, and he hated the second one.
Well,
he was like, I hate this. He liked the first one fine, but yeah.
That's why you got to go in blind. Like, I was going into the second film expecting it to be around different characters who are experiencing the same thing. And it's so much more interesting that it's the same characters.
Yeah, I think, because it was one of those films that I knew it had a sequel coming for a long time, and that they held the trailer really late, I think, for this. Like, so the plot of the film or like how it was going to work wasn't clear at all for the longest time. And, yeah, that was one of the things I was just so interested about, being like, how the hell are they going to do a sequel? Because they confirmed it's like time loop again, and the star is returning and all this stuff. But yeah, I think I was just amazed at how it just like how cleverly it managed to do something new, but also give you more of what you loved about the first one.
Did they plan to make a sequel from the get-go? Because the way that they move into each other, it almost feels like I was watching like the second season of a show as opposed to like a sequel to a movie. I don't know how to quite articulate that, but
it was the sequel was always planned, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to continue the franchise. But a couple of things that weren't always planned. Interestingly, there was an original ending to this film.
Yes, there was.
Yeah. So what actually in the film's original ending, Tree is taken to the hospital after her encounter with Laurie. The doctor instructs Tree to stay away from pain medication for at least a day due to the extent of her injuries. After he leaves, a nurse comes in and says she's giving Tree something for the pain. Tree informs the nurse of the doctor's orders. The nurse reveals herself to be Dr. Butler's wife, Stephanie. So that's the wife of the like tutor that she was sleeping with. Who says it is for her own pain. She then murders Tree in revenge for her husband's affair with the girl. This version was shown in the test screenings for the film and was received negatively by the audience, which led to the writers to come out with a theatrical ending. So Christopher Landon...
She also gets thrown into a new time loop.
Yes.
In the alternate ending.
Really? That's not what I had. Not what I saw written down. But...
Oh my goodness.
Sure.
I don't know who to believe.
But yeah, they also that was received negatively by the audience. And then they
fair
came up with
enough.
the poisoned cupcake. But interestingly, and I'm sure you know this as well, Brie, but you might not, AJ. But this film was announced in 2007.
Wow.
Yeah, 10 years earlier. It was called Half to Death. It was going to be produced by Platinum Dunes, which is the Michael Bay production company that made all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street reboots. It was going to star Megan Fox.
Yes, I knew that.
2007 Megan Fox.
I'm glad they picked someone else.
And this was they actually released a synopsis for the film in 2007. So this is what it said. And let's see together if it's changed since then. So a young college freshman named Teresa is troubled when she discovers she is living the same day over and over again. One that starts out innocently enough, but always ends with her brutal murder by an unknown attacker. Could the murderer be her boyfriend Gregory, who was also sleeping with Teresa's roommate Laurie? Or could it be Laurie, who is ferociously envious that Gregory might like Teresa more? Maybe it's one of Teresa's classmates, unable to get her attention. Perhaps it's one of her professors who cannot consummate their passion for his top student. Or perhaps it's some secret skull and bones type society who picked Teresa for no good reason to be their ritualistic sacrifice. It's just like single white female meets Groundhog Day meets captivity, and certain to be just as terrifying.
Okay. I like that it described being stuck in a time loop as something that would be troubling. It's like, or a fate worse than death, but troubling works as well, you know.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things as well. So, Brie, you said you hadn't seen any trailers. But AJ, I know you and I had both seen the trailer, and because the trailer famously uses 50 Cent's "In the Club" as the ringtone, and go shawty, it's your birthday. And whereas in the movie, the ringtone is like, "Hey, it's your birthday, and now you gotta pick up the phone," and it's like this original birthday themed ringtone. But the film couldn't actually afford "In the Club," and I remember that being like,
I bet he regrets that now.
No, well, he said they probably, he wouldn't have had control over putting that in the trailer, but he said he prefers the one in the film anyway. But then the trailer for the sequel uses "In the Club" again. It is. What annoys me about that is that I saw the trailer for the first film, and I just loved how they made the dun 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 from "In the Club" seem so ominous and creepy. It was like a spin on the creepy version of a pop song from all the trailers, and I was on board because of that.
Now I want to watch it, the trailer.
It's real cool. So it makes "In the Club" a scary song, sort of like how Us made Five a scary song. So that's more or less the films. There is one piece of dumb IMDb trivia. Do you know both Happy Death Day to You and Clerks 2 are sequels in which a character confuses Helen Keller for Anne Frank out loud as a joke? I do that all the time. And my life is a series of continually diminishing return sequels.
I thought that there was, I thought that this particular IMDb trivia was really fun. It's actually two of them, and it seems like one is answering the other. So, in Tree's supposed last loop, where she fixes everything, including her relationship with her roommate Laurie, it is hinted that she is actually the killer, because that is the only time she chooses not to give Tree the poisoned cupcake after Tree has apologized. This also reveals that all Laurie needed was an apology. And then the next trivia item is... In Tree's supposed last loop where she fixes everything, including her relationship with her roommate, Laurie does not give her the cupcake. She may have been disoriented from Tree's apology because she later releases John Toombs from his restraints, who then goes on to attack Tree as before. This does not reveal that all Laurie needed was an apology. She's still a psychopath.
It's such a... The first one you read, the second one I'll give a little bit more leeway to. But the first one, it's just someone who hasn't seen the end of the movie. Yeah. It's someone describing that scene like they haven't seen the end of the movie yet. That's so funny. What a good find.
I read that and I almost thought it was the same one repeated, and then I got to the end and I was like, oh, shade.
I forgot to mention this when we're talking about which one we liked more or what we thought of them. While I'm conflicted on the second one, it does have the best scene in both films, which is the hard times montage of Tree killing herself over and over again. Yeah, that's so delivering on the film's premise kind of thing.
Yeah. It's so good. I rewatched it on YouTube today just because it's so fun, and I love that song. That's like the best song, and the lyrics like apply to her life as well. Because she's like, "All I want is to wake up fine," and then later she's like, I don't know, it's just something about hitting the ground.
Yeah, no,
when
that
I
was
hit
intentional.
the ground, and she jumps off the.
And apparently, some of the scenes reference the music video of the song.
Yeah.
Oh, was this made for the movie?
No,
No,
but
can't.
the music
it.
video is quite similar. It has like electrocution and shit like that.
True. Yes.
So, time to continue the franchise. So,
Hooray!
there is Christopher Landon, the director, in an interview with EW just before Happy Death Day to You, he confirmed plans for a third film. He said he always imagined this as a trilogy, so that's answering a question from before. He went on to describe his idea for Happy Death Day 3 as really bonkers and fun. He mentioned that Happy Death Day to You includes a credit scene that offers a big tease of where the franchise could go next. The quote is, "Oh God." Well, I mean, there's a big clue already in Happy Death Day to You. There's an end credit sequence, so people stick around, they'll see that. But beyond that, mum's the word right now. So yeah, there's a mid-credit scene where essentially, like the government come to the campus and like, we know about this, we want to test things on it, so we need to put someone in a time loop to run experiments on them, and so they're like, oh, I know who we can get. So they get Danielle, who's the like. Did you not see it, or you just?
I didn't. I didn't know that it wasn't in the
DVD you obtained legally.
Yeah.
So they put Danielle on a time loop and it ends with her screaming.
Which can I go on a tangent here?
Yeah.
Based off that. The writers of Happy Death Day to You do not know what to do with Danielle as a character.
Yeah, hard out.
Because like the big kind of conflict is that now she's dating Carter in the alternate dimension, and I kind of liked the idea that she's really nice because she's a bitch in the
really nice but really dumb.
Yeah, and she's like a bad person in the original, and in this new dimension she's really nice. Then you find out 3/4 of the way through the movie that in this dimension she's actually cheating on Carter, and Tree finds this out. Does nothing with the information, doesn't tell Carter, doesn't reveal anything, and then they get Danielle as if she's a completely different character and occupies a completely different part of the story to fake being a French blind person to distract the dean of the school so they can steal the Sisyphus machine back. And then the Tree goes back to her dimension again, doesn't tell this dimension's Carter that Danielle is cheating on him, but they do kiss, meaning that he's cheating on Danielle now as she like transports back to the other dimension, which, as is kind of hinted at the start, like if she tells him that Danielle's cheating on him, then this is the perfect dimension because your mum's alive and you've got your boyfriend. But they don't go there at all. They don't even acknowledge it. And then at the end, I get that it's the other dimension's Danielle that they trap in a time loop. But I was like, holy shit, she's not that bad. She's not been that much of a villain to these movies. And in the other dimension, she did help you.
Yeah, she does this big... Yeah, the cheating thing is weird. It's like, just, like... Because throwing in a scene like that is such like a surgical, methodical way to be like, you're not supposed to like this character. You know, like it's just ticking up. It's the reverse of saving the cat.
It's killing the cat. Yeah.
And so... They should have just left her, like left them together in that dimension, but then done more to establish what Danielle had done wrong in Dimension 1. Yeah, to deserve being put in a time loop. Because I thought it was very like, oh, okay.
Dimension 2 Danielle almost needed to be like the nicest person in the world for the conflict that she has to choose between being with Carter or being with her mum, for that to actually hold any weight. Because she's not a nice person in Dimension 2, it's like, well, you could probably steal Carter away from her if you tried.
Yeah, and their relationship never seems sound anyway between Danielle and Carter, because it's kind of hinted at that Danielle is just using Carter for his brains because she's dumb and can't pass her classes.
Make her really nice in the other dimension. That's a great idea. They should have just gone with that. This is a strange part of the movie.
Yeah.
I think it's hard because I really liked her as a mean girl in the first film. You know?
Yeah. But exactly. They should have doubled down how mean she is in the first one, because I didn't even think she was that bad in the first one.
She makes fun of a deaf person.
She what?
She makes fun of a deaf person's accent.
Sure, but she's like a sassy best friend. She's not the villain of the story. And then in the second one, they should have done the polar opposite of that.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah. All right. So, anyway, the film came out this year in February, and in March, and I'll say underperformed at the box office. It made like $28 million on a $9 million budget, something like that. So not great numbers, but it still did better than its budget. But Jason Blum of Blumhouse tweeted in March Q&A. Question and answers. And so if you ask him a question, he'll give you the answer. And then Jeff the Movie Man, #Time's Up for Bryan Singer, said, how likely is it we'll get a Happy Death Day 3? And he said, not very, but not impossible. Because apparently Jason Blum is famous for being kind of a dick about like, well, didn't do well, so fuck you, you don't get your third one. I think the same thing happened with Sinister, I think is the other one. I've heard that Sinister 2 didn't do well, and this planned trilogy, he's just like, well, fuck, you can't get it then. And then in June...
Good. No, I'm just kidding.
In June, Christopher Landon tweeted, since I keep reading stuff about it, I'll say it out loud. There is no Happy Death Day 3 in development. It is just a rumor unless at Netflix wants to pony up and finish this trilogy. It just ain't happening. And then in August 2019, so just a couple months ago, he stated he had an outline written for the third film, and he believed he will share it eventually in some medium. He said he's not like just going around being like, this is what would have happened in the third one, because he does still hold on a little bit of hope.
Sounds like it's going to be a graphic novel that no one will read.
Fuck yeah, I'm going to read that.
No one will read.
I'm always worried if they do a third one, though, because the third one could be really bad.
I mean, the second one's not that amazing. I don't know. Again, if I can encroach into my continue the franchise first, because it'll be the least thought out of any of these. Because
I can really give you a run for your money, mate.
The director and writer just said what I would do, which is make it bonkers.
Okay.
Take me to a place where the time loop is one like facet of a larger, weirder idea and story. I don't have any more ideas than that. I just want to see it get as fucking weird as I thought the second one was going to
We have to get a title from you, right?
Well, I know you came up with a title and I know what it is, and I want you to tell everyone.
All right. Well, my sequel is called Happy Death Day to Me. But the E is a 3.
Hell yeah, dude.
So that's pretty much all I have. So between us, AJ, we have an idea. I was thinking about like different ways to do it, because there's the obvious, like, I mean, I say obvious, but like the way to developing based on where the mid-credit scene leaves us with Danielle somehow in the time loop. But then even then I'm like, well, where does the film actually go from there? I thought about potentially somehow either making Tree the killer or have the killer be the person living the time loop.
Yeah. And
then that's like, Happy Death Day to Me. But yeah, I feel like Happy Death Day to You, Happy Death Day to Me are like good titles.
Absolutely, dude. I'm proud of you.
Thank you, man.
You're the backbone of my life. Bria's laughing. I want to confirm that for all people who are just listening to this. If you were just stone cold silent, I would have just been like, anyway, next franchise.
All right, Bri, lay it on us.
Okay, so I don't have a title except for that if they make yours, then they can make mine and call it For He's a Jolly Good Fellow. Then it would be a 4, so then it would be a saga instead of a trilogy. But mine is that there's like a retired police officer in one of the dimensions where they blame Toombs for Tree's death. And for all of the other associated deaths, whether or not Tree is alive.
Yeah.
is irrelevant to the story. But the significant thing is that he starts investigating the murder because he doesn't suspect that it's Toombs. He says there's too many things that are strange about her death. Like, how did he get the mask? Who set him free? He's asking those questions and no one else is. And so he starts investigating and dies as a result of that and gets stuck in a time loop where he's now trying to solve the murder, the real murderer, and it could be someone else because it's a different dimension.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. We probably need to wrap this up.
Yeah, we do. One thing that I'll get 2 birds with 1 stone. Brie.
Yes.
When we get on guests who aren't from New Zealand, we like to get them to do a New Zealand accent. So can you wrap us up in what I'm sure is going to be the best New Zealand accent we've heard from someone because you slip into it randomly anyway.
Yeah, but you're putting me on the spot. I don't know where to begin.
It started out pretty good.
Yeah.
As soon as you got to your E's, it was like, what?
I know that you guys go like read and get, and you like don't
Read.
read.
Huh. I do go like that.
But no was the first.
No.
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 That was the first word I really learned in Kiwi because I was like, Maddie, you say no weird.
No.
It's no. With
No.
the W.
All right. Well, thank you, Brie, for coming on. And
Thank you so much for having me. It's like a dream come true.
Oh, stop.
I love you guys'
I've gone all red.
podcast.
you're the backbone of this podcast.
Do you have anything you'd like to plug before we send you off?
Yeah, so my wife and I are starting a podcast. It launches December 1st. It's called Chapter 1, Take 2. And it's a podcast where we review movies that are based on books.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Keep an eye out for that. We'll share it on our socials.
Maybe we can do a crossover.
Ooh, okay, now we're
This
talking.
is a
AJ will have to read some books.
Ah, okay.
no, thank you.
Okay, I gotta go. Well, thank you for the offer. All right. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to our freaky fan fiasco episode of Film Franchise Fortnights. It's just AJ here. Richard, he's currently in Japan and cannot record an outro for this episode because we forgot to do it before he left. Because if we've learnt one thing this Halloween season, it's that the scariest thing of all is poor timing skills and poor scheduling skills. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. As I said, we will tell you what our next franchise is in just a moment. But if you did like this, please head on over to Cult Pop Shop on all our social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Acast, iTunes, wherever we are. Go over there and follow /subscribe /like us, please. And also leave a 5-star review on iTunes if you can. That would be really helpful. You can check us out on Patreon if you want to support the show at www.patreon.com/cultpopshow, or you can send us an email and tell us what you thought of the 6 movies we covered in this episode at cultpopshowmedia@gmail.com. So check that out. So next week, we'll probably just be doing a casual Q&A thing since Richard will be recording from Japan. But the week after, for Film Franchise Fortnights, we've got a very special guest, and we're going to be doing an episode on the 2 movies in the Sex and the City franchise, which, if you know, depending on how much you know about the Little Empire podcast network, that will mean something to you, and you might even be able to guess who the guest is. So yeah, that'll be out in a fortnight. That's our next episode. And while we're on the topic of Little Empire Podcast, why don't I go over to the Facebook group for Little Empire Podcast Pals and join that group and jump in on the conversation about all the wonderful podcasts on the network. But until next time, hope you enjoyed this episode and hope you have a very spooky Halloween. Blah, 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 blah.